Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name is Matt Daniel, and this podcast is about doctors' careers. It's part of my mission to help others create successful and meaningful careers. Today, I'm having a conversation with Chelcie Jewitt, and she's co-founder of Surviving in Scrubs, and we're talking about how can we better support women at work. Now, most women doctors have experienced sexism at work and face adversity ranging from microaggression to sexual assault. What can we do about it? Chelcie tells me that changing the whole medical culture won't happen overnight, but there are small steps that each one of us can take. When witnessing discrimination, the least that bystanders can do is to acknowledge the event to the person on the receiving end, but it's important to let the victim survivor decide what should happen next. Speaking up and listening to what others say is a key step, as is having an open mind and seeing things from the other's point of view. Welcome. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, so I'm Chelcie Jewitt. Clinically, I'm an emergency medicine registrar working up in Merseyside. Just coming to the end of maternity leave, actually, so haven't been doing much medicine recently. I graduated from Liverpool and fell in love with a Scouser and have been here ever since. Love working here. And I also am part of and one of the co-founders of the non-profit campaign organisation Surviving in Scrubs.
Tell me about Surviving in Scrubs.
Sure. So Surviving in Scrubs is an organisation that myself and my friend and colleague, Dr. Becky Cox, started just over 18 months ago now. Becky and I are, so Becky's a GP, she works down in Oxford. She's got a lot of other strings to her bow, so she'll probably hate me reducing her down to GP, but she's got a lot of other things going on. But basically, we both have experienced sexism, misogyny, and unfortunately harassment and sexual assault at work. And Becky got in contact with me after the piece of work that I did with the BMA. So I did a piece of work with the BMA, which was published in August 21, the Sexism in Medicine survey. So that was off the back of my own experiences, and that survey went out to all doctors in the UK. We were expecting about 1,000 respondents, but we got 2.5. And kind of like the headline news was that 91% of female doctors had experienced sexism at work. And there was, this was a piece of work that hadn't really been done before. And then Becky got in contact with me. We started chatting over Zoom because it was sort of on again, off again lockdown. And then we actually met up in person the following spring. And by this point, there'd been that initial media interest in this survey, in this piece of work, and there'd been some other bits of work going around, but then nothing really seemed to be being spoken about, and it didn't seem to be high on kind of the medical agenda. So Becky and I thought, what can we do? What's going to change things? What's going to make people, stand up and listen? So that's where we came up with the idea of Surviving in Scrubs. So at our core, we are, at our core is our website, so survivinginscrubs.co.uk, where anyone who works in healthcare, because this isn't just a, sexism, misogyny, etc., isn't just a doctor thing. It's a societal thing, but it's everyone in healthcare that it affects. So anyone in healthcare, irrespective of where they work, what specialty they work in, what their job role is, can write to us anonymously. We do ask them if they feel that they want to tell us where they work, what they do. We don't publish that data, but we keep that for our records so we can have a look at themes. But essentially, we want people to tell us their story, tell us their truths, tell us their testimonies of what's happened to them. And we now have a collective narrative of over 210 stories on our website at the time of recording this. And some of those are a couple of sentences, and some of them are pages and pages long, but their voices are heard. We've got this collection of voices, of experiences, of what is happening, and that's enabled Becky and I to lobby for policy change, to advocate for these survivors of sexual misconduct at work. And that's now our campaign has grown. You know, we've only been going for just over 18 months, but we were knocking on 10 Downing Street in December. So we've come really far in that time, but we've got a long way to go to keep this, you know, this on the agenda and to bring about some positive changes.
Actually, I want to go back to your original research that says 91% of women have experienced sexism in medicine. I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it? I think.
Um,
Why? Yeah.
I was going to say astonishing.
Or
I
maybe.
think it's a shocking statistic, but I think for women in particular, I don't think it's that surprising. In terms of the sexism that I've experienced, I easily experience it at least weekly, and then some weeks it's probably daily. It's one of those things that as soon as your eyes are open to it, you can't unsee it, and it happens all the time.
I think that's probably one of the challenges, maybe, for me as a man, because I'm not on the receiving end of it, and maybe that's why I don't see it. So the people that are on the receiving end, they see it. So perhaps what's more astonishing, maybe for a woman, would you say, is that all? As a man, I'm thinking, gosh, that's a lot, and maybe women are thinking, what are the other 9% of the people walk around with their head buried in the sand? I mean, why are we only just now doing something about it?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. There are so many barriers to speaking up. I think the fact that there are a lot more women in leadership positions now, and there are a lot more female a lot more female consultants. There's a lot more of a female presence in not only hospital medicine, but medicine generally, as well as education. You know, it's not 50-50 in a lot of areas, but there is some representation of women. And I think that's made it easier for people to start speaking up and talking about it. You know, we know that in particular, peers talk about these things together. I speak about my experiences to my friends all the time, and vice versa. And I've been doing that since I was a medical student. It was only when I got to F4, I had a bit of time out between choosing my career training. It was at that point that I realized actually all these things that we're all talking about that seem really normal to us, because they are normal, they are normalized, that is the culture in which we work, aren't right, and they are sexist. It was that awakening that kind of prompted me to want to speak up and do something about it. But I think just flipping that switch of the fact that, all right, this is normal where we work, but it doesn't mean that it's right. I think once that switch has been flipped in people, it's really hard to flip it back. And I think that's produced this want for a lot of people to talk about it and to raise their voices about issues. Obviously, I'm talking particularly about gender equality, but we know that there's other inequalities as well within the institution that we all work in.
So what kind of things are going on that men might not notice?
Oh, anything and everything. There's an argument as to whether it's not being noticed or whether it's being noticed and not spoken about.
Okay, so tell me a bit more about that distinction.
I think, so if I go back to your original question, then I'll follow on to that one. So the kind of things that we get reported to on our website, or talking to, as I say, talking to peers, or talking at events when we go out and speak about these topics, it can range from inappropriate comments, inappropriate jokes, based around, you know, stereotypes, gender roles, etc., that disadvantage women, or make women feel othered or not included within the workspace, or that they are less valued. And then it can escalate. It can escalate to inappropriate touching. It can inappropriate texting. So, you know, unwanted advances that the woman may be repeatedly saying no to, but it just keeps going, harassment, in other words. And then we have had some reports, unfortunately, of sexual assault and even rape in the workplace. And I'm not saying that all of these incidences have been witnessed by someone else, because we know that from the data that we have, we know that perpetrators often do this on a one-to-one basis. But when things are witnessed by others, particularly comments or maybe an inappropriate touch here and there, it's hard for anyone to speak up about it, to speak up against a culture. And I feel that that can be particularly difficult for men sometimes, because they've got kind of got pressures from both sides. They want to be part of the team, but equally they want to be a decent person, and there can be a conflict there, which makes it difficult. And we know that there's ways of going about being an ally. You don't have to call things out right there, right then. You know, that even might be detrimental to the victim of these behaviors at that time. But you can go and ask if they're okay, and even just talking to someone who's experienced either microaggressions or full-on aggressions, just asking if they're okay makes them know that what you saw wasn't right, and it makes them feel as though they matter. And I think that's a real that has huge impact on that individual. And I think it's something that's very simple and very easy to do in theory. But I think when we all work within a culture of tolerance, it's hard to go against the grain.
Mm-hmm. So something there, if something happens that isn't as it should be, then the least that somebody can do is check in with that person and acknowledge that something's happened that probably wasn't great. And you said sometimes challenging it there and then might not be the right thing to do. So I'm wondering, okay, if I see something, then, you know, yes, I can acknowledge, and yes, I can talk to that person. But equally, I'm guessing there'll be people thinking that say, well, if I saw something that's wrong, I need to report that. So what's the problem with somebody else reporting it?
So reporting things is fine. I think I always come from thinking about the victim, the survivor, and I'm of the opinion that everything should be focused towards them and towards their well-being. There is a want to help people. I think, you know, most of us in healthcare do want to help other people, and that's probably why we've gone into healthcare. So when you see someone being wronged, you want to make things right. But what you think is right, i.e., this needs reporting, this needs, you know, this person needs reporting to the GMC, they need their license taken away. You don't necessarily have the power over that, because that incident didn't happen to you. As a witness, you absolutely, definitely can do those things. But I think you owe it to the person that's had this behavior done unto them to make them aware of what you're doing. Ask them if they want that to happen, because realistically, reports probably aren't going to go anywhere unless they're involved in that investigative reporting process. And if they don't want to go down that route, that's absolutely their prerogative. They don't have to. But it may be that they don't want to do it now, that they need a bit of time to, and this very often happens with trauma. People need time to process it as an individual, you know, get their head around it, and then at a later date they feel able to, or that they want to, report things formally. So it's very hard for me to give people black and white instructions of what to do, because every incident is nuanced. and there are different factors that play into things, i.e. whether or not it's someone, so the perpetrator is a consultant and they're very junior, you know, that hierarchy impacts potentially not only the survivor's career, but it could then affect other people's career who are active bystanders, etc. So there's so much that needs to be taken into consideration. But the thing that I would say that makes the most impact, and is the thing that we all need to be doing, irrespective of irrespective of what our gender is that we all need to be listening to people when they talk about their experiences, and not necessarily wanting to fix things and make, you know, go down that reporting route, but just listening and creating this open and honest culture of what is actually going on. And I think the more open and honest the culture around, you know, in the NHS is about what's going on in terms of sexual misconduct, I think the more people realise that there needs to be change, and that then leads to, you know, organisations making changes, but also individuals, if they feel listened to, are going to feel more and more able to speak up against people who are repeatedly perpetrating these behaviours, and that will eventually be what is going to change the culture, is the talking and the listening, which seems really simple to me, but I'm aware that it may not seem simple to other people because of the other pressures that they're under.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. I like that the practical thing, which is that the least that you can do is you can acknowledge with the person that's been the victim or the survivor. You can acknowledge with them that something's happened, and then put them at the center of whatever happens next. You know, that kind of that strikes me as a really powerful starting point, isn't it? And then it's also it becomes from their point of view rather than from my point of view, if that makes sense, because my point of view, you know, might be way off, or it might be irrelevant, or it might not be what the other person wants to do. So you used the term allyship. Tell me a little bit more about what that is.
So being an ally to me means listening to what people are saying, amplifying their voices, and doing what you can to help them spread their message, and to just support them, basically. So I think it's pretty, I think for someone to be an ally, it just means believing someone and supporting them in the simplest terms. And I think that's most easily demonstrated, again, by men talking about these issues. I think I am a woman, and I'm very much coming at this gender equality from a woman's perspective. I am aware that men can have gender inequality as well. It's a lot less common, and it's very often a lot less violent than what women have to deal with. So though I'm talking quite reductive in terms of this is a woman's problem, it isn't. It's a problem for everyone, and men need to talk about it. Women talk about this all the time. Women probably talk about with this all the time, because this is all I ever talk about, but women talk about this all the time, and men need to talk about it too. Men need to talk about the fact that their friend, who is a man, has just assaulted someone and that wasn't okay, or that man has said an inappropriate joke about that woman and that is not okay, and calling it out and just talking about it, and explaining why it's not right, and saying, come on, it doesn't have to be a full-on lecture. It can just be a, mate, come on, that wasn't right, or come on, mate, you know what I mean? So that's kind of, that's how I see it anyway. It might seem a bit bit simplified, but I'm a simple thinking person.
I'm interested in that culture because you talked about culture changes, if we all talk about it, and maybe women already talk about it, it's perhaps men that don't talk about it. So if more men talk about it, then that's how culture changes. But I'm interested in that you said that sometimes people see it, but people just tolerate it, or people say, well, that's just the way it is, that's the way that we do about it, that's normal, it's okay, that's what we've always done. I mean, what do we do with that kind of just acceptance that this is how it is and therefore it'll stay like that? Because lots of people say, well, this is just how it is, isn't it? And we don't do anything about it. So what needs to change for people to start doing something about it?
So culture is the hardest thing to change. It is the hardest thing to change because it's ingrained in everything. And realistically, it's to completely change culture. One is probably nigh on impossible realistically, but two, it's going to take a really, 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 really long time. And I think there is a lot of well-meaning organizations, a lot of well-meaning individuals who want to put this intervention in place and that intervention in place, but they want to make sure that it's going to completely fix culture. It's not. I'm going to just tell you it's not. There's absolutely no point in trying to have just this silver bullet that's going to automatically change the culture of healthcare. It's just not going to happen. But what we can all do is we can all do something, because a little bit of something is better than doing nothing. And again, on that individual basis, it comes to talking about it and, talking about it, listening to others talk about it and reading up on it and learning about what is going on and thinking about things outside the box and looking at things from a different perspective. And I think that's, again, you don't have to all of a sudden know scripture and verse of every equality law within legislation, but just knowing a little bit and being okay with the fact that you don't know everything. I think probably in the high pressure of medicine, you just want to be an expert all the time and you don't feel fully confident or comfortable going into something if you're not 100% prepped and you know the answer to every question. Whereas actually, we all need to get a bit better at being comfortable with being uncomfortable. We're all going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. And what we can do is we can learn from those mistakes in terms of, you might make a joke at work that's inappropriate and offensive to someone. You learn from that. You don't double down and say that joke was really funny. You learn from it and you say, I'm really sorry, that was inappropriate, I won't do it again. And you reflect on it and you learn from it. And that's you changing the culture because you've changed a little bit about yourself and that has an impact. So it's like these little changes. We need the big changes too, but actually it's the little changes, the day-to-day interactions that are going to be the thing that makes a big impact overall in the long term. So yeah, that's what I'd say for that.
It's actually also really powerful, if a senior male consultant says, I'm sorry, that was really inappropriate, not only does the senior male consultant learn, but everybody else hears, okay, this is a person who's listened, and next time I can speak up because this is a person that listens and is willing to change. And there's a kind of slightly there's a weird thing I always think about diversity. I was talking to medical students about that this morning, that lots and lots of literature from the kind of business world would suggest that the more diverse organizations, boards, senior leadership teams you have, the better the outcomes are. So it's actually, if we create those kind of cultures where everybody can speak up and, and people get on with each other and people look out for each other, then not only does that help, the person that happens to be, in a persecuted group, it actually helps the whole organization. And therefore, by extension, even the people that might be in a position of power. So it always kind of struck me as a bit weird that because I think a lot of this is about power, isn't it? Or I think, you can come back to me, but that's how I see a lot of that. But the reality is that if you have that diversity in organization, it helps even the person that currently has the most power.
Absolutely, it's all about power. And I think I think we need more diversity in medicine, generally speaking. There's a need to broaden out the people that the cohorts that are coming into medical schools. We need people from different backgrounds, not just affluent private school fourth generation doctors. I am not one of them, FYI, and they've got a place, but they don't represent, or they can't represent the whole of our population. I can't represent the whole of our population. We need anyone from any kind of background coming and doing medicine, not only so that we can all, not so that we've got a diverse team for our own sakes, so that we are aware of each other's kind of different characteristics and we're working well together, but it goes down to patient safety. There's data out there about how there's disadvantages for women versus men, but also women of color versus white women in terms of their health outcomes. And I think the more representation we've got at the level of the medics and healthcare staff out there who are making decisions about people's lives and people's quality of life, it's going to have a better outcome on patients. So there's so many arguments for changes to kind of the structure of training, the structure of NHS, to make it more equitable for not only women compared to men, but for other protected characteristics as well, because it will have a knock-on effect. Admittedly, it's going to take a while to get to the point where we have a real positive knock-on effect for our patient care, but it is something that I think we should all be working towards.
Let's think about practical actions that people can take themselves. So let's sort of start with me. When I go back into the workplace tomorrow, what do you think I should be doing tomorrow at work?
I think I've already said it, to be honest with you. I think it's a case of listening to others, talking to others, and educating yourself. So there's so many resources out there now. We've got some on our website about kind of what people can do, resources for people to go and look at, but also things like our social media posts. We've got some educational posts coming up in terms of what we mean by sexism, what we mean by misogyny, what does that look like in healthcare. So there are, those are our resources, but there are so many resources out there that are free to access and easy to read, and even things like YouTube and podcasts. It's just, there's so much data out there. So just going looking and reading about it, and finding out about it, and then maybe bringing that into the workplace. Oh, I listened to this podcast, what do you think about this? And actually kind of signposting that you are open to these conversations and to these issues. No one would expect you to be an expert, but they'd feel then comfortable to talk to you about it. And then that might then lead on to things that you could do practically at work, whether that be organize some form of like awareness day or training, or an education, a teaching session or something about it, or even just somewhere where people can have a cup of tea and just have a talk to you about it, so that they feel included and feel part of the team and feel valued. So they're not massive things to do. I've probably made them sound like massive things, but it's just, again, little things that do make a big difference.
They sound very achievable. What about for the women listening? What would be your tips to them?
My tips to them would be talk to each other, talk to men, make men listen. If you are in a leadership position as a woman, then help the women behind you, support women behind you, and yeah, just keep spreading the word and trying to do anything and everything. No, just keep spreading the word so that we can try and make a difference to this culture, because we just need to keep going with it and put pressure on organizations where you can. And if you've got stories, whether you are a man or a woman or non-binary, whatever your gender, if you have stories of gender inequality, sexism, misogyny, harassment, or assault, please, if you feel able to, submit them to our website, because our collective narrative is really bringing about so much change, and we're in so many meetings with large organizations, and they're listening to us. And so that means that they're listening to people who've experienced this. And I'm very grateful, and I'm very aware that I'm in a privileged position for people to feel comfortable and confident enough to tell me their trauma. But it is going towards change for the future. So please feel free to submit them.
And maybe my final questions for the organizations, for the medical directors and the chief executives, for those kind of people, what tips would you have for them?
The first thing I'd say is get in touch with us, because we have a big long document of recommendations for organizations, and we're more than happy to share that, and we're more than happy to help implement those changes. But the three kind of areas that we kind of want organizations to focus on is educating and training for staff in terms of awareness of what's going on, allyship that we touched on today, and again, what organizations can do. We need improved support for people who do report issues. So that's going to be either peer or near peer support, or links with psychological support. If that's possible to get going in your organization, please do that. And then the third thing is for organizations to look at their own internal policies. We know that very few NHS organizations in England actually have a sexual safety policy. A lot of these issues of sexual misconduct actually usually fall under bullying policies, where there is some role for that, but from what we know in the literature and the research, actually it needs its own policy, because there are nuances to sexual misconduct that aren't covered and aren't thought of. And again, that's something that we can help with as an organization. So those three things: so training, support, and policy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.